Hello guys! Hello everyone! So, nandito ulit ako. Try ko siyang i-break talaga yung habit na kailangan ko talaga na hindi magsabi na mamaya na ulit. Magbabasa talaga ako kahit konti lang. Natapos tayo dun sa work-centeredness. Kung ano yung magiging problem kung sa work. So, ngayon naman, focus tayo sa position-centeredness. Yung binabasa ko ulit is yung The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Hindi ako nakapagbasa kanina kasi naghahanap ako ng apps na pwede ako makapag-live. Kasi nandun ako sa limit nung sa isang apps ko. Kaya ngayon tinatry ko itong Streamlab. And then, medyo busy pa din pag-edit ng mga videos at saka yung pag-meeting. May meeting kasi ako kanina umaga sa Manila. So, hindi ko din siya talaga na ng oras. Kaya ngayon, bago ako matutulog, magbabasa muna ako. Wait lang ha. So, position-centeredness, a driving force of many people is position. Not only tangible, material possessions such as fashionable clothes, homes, cars, boats, and jewelry, but also the intangible possession of fame, glory, or social prominence. Most of us are aware, through our own experience, how singularly flawed such a center is, simply because it can vanish rapidly and it is influenced by so many forces. If my sense of security lies in my reputation or in the things I have, my life will be in a constant state of dread, jeopardy that this position may be lost or stolen or devalued. If I'm in the presence of someone or greater net worth of fame or status, I feel inferior. If I'm in the presence of someone of lesser net worth or fame or status, I feel superior. My sense of self-worth constantly fluctuates. I don't have any sense of constancy or a courage or persistent self-hood. I am constantly trying to protect and ensure my assets, properties, securities, position, or reputation. We have all heard stories of people committing suicide after losing their fortunes in a significant stock decline or their fame in a political reversal. Pleasure-centeredness. Another common center closely allied with position is that of fun and pleasure. We live in a world where instant gratification is available and encouraged. Television and movies are major influences in increasing people's expectation. They graphically portray what other people have and can do in the living the life of ease and fun. But while the glitter of pleasure-centered lifestyles is graphically portrayed, the natural result of such lifestyles, the impact on the inner person, on productivity, on relationships, is seldom accurately seen. Innocent pleasure in moderation can provide relaxation for the body and mind and can foster family and other relationships. But pleasure per se offers no deep, lasting satisfaction or a sense of fulfillment. The pleasure-centered person, too soon bored with its succeeding level of fun, constantly cries for more and more. So the next new pleasure has to be bigger and better, more exciting with a bigger high. A person in this state becomes almost entirely narcissistic, interpreting all of life in terms of the pleasure it provides to the self here and now. Too many vacations that last too long, too many movies, too much TV, too much video game playing, too much undisciplined leisure time in which a person continually takes the course, at least resistance, gradually wastes a life. It ensures that a person's capacity stays dormant, that talents remain undeveloped, that the mind and spirit become lethargic, and that the heart is unfulfilled. Where is the security, the guidance, the wisdom, and the power? At the low end of the continuum, in the pleasure of fleeting moment. Malcolm Modriches writes, a 20th century testimony. When I look back on my life nowadays, which I sometimes do, what strikes me most forcibly about it is that what seemed at the time most significant and seductive seems now most futile and absorbed. For instance, success in all of its various guises, being known and being praised, ostensible pleasures like acquiring money or seducing women, or traveling, going to and fro in the world and up and down, and it like Satan, explaining and experiencing whatever Vanity Fair has to offer. In retrospect, all these exercises and self-gratification seem pure fantasy, what Pascal called licking the earth. Licking the earth. Okay. So, dun sa isa, is hindi mapopost mo yung mga information. Ito is purely on sending of message. Friend, enemy centeredness. Young people are particularly, though certainly not exclusively, susceptible to becoming friend-centered. Acceptance and belonging to a peer group can become almost supremely important. The distorted and ever-changing social mirror becomes the source for the four life support factors, creating a high degree of dependence on the fluctuating moods, feelings, attitudes, and behavior of others. Friend-centeredness can also focus exclusively on one person, taking on some of the dimensions of marriages, the emotional dependence on one individual, the escalating need-conflict spiral, and the resulting negative interaction can grow out of friend-centeredness. And what about putting an enemy at the center of one's life? Most people would never think of it, and probably no one would ever do it consciously. Nevertheless, enemy centering is very common, particularly when there is frequent interaction between people who are in a real conflict. When someone feels he has been unjustly dealt with by an emotionally or socially significant person, it is very easy for him to become preoccupied with the injustice and make the other person the center of his life, rather than proactively leading his own life. The enemy-centered person is counterproductively reacting to the behavior and attitudes of a perceived enemy. One friend of mine who taught at university became very distraught because of the weaknesses of a particular administrator with whom he had a negative relationship. this throat. Let's check the meaning of this throat. This a deeply upset and agitated, distraught parents looking for a runaway teenager. Deeply upset. One friend of mine who taught at the university became very distraught because of the weaknesses of a particular administrator with whom he had a negative relationship. He allowed himself to think about the man constantly until eventually it became an obsession. It is so preoccupied him that it affected the quality of his relationship with his family, his church, and his working associates. He finally came to the conclusion that he had to leave the university and accept a teaching appointment somewhere else. Wouldn't you really prefer to teach at this university? If the man were not here, I asked him. Yes, I would, he responded. But as long as he is here, then my staying is too disrupted to everything in life. I have to go. Why have you made this administrator the center of your life? I asked him. He was shocked by the question. He denied it, but I pointed out to him that he was allowing one individual in his weakness to distort his entire map of life, to undermine his faith in the quality of his relationship with his loved ones. He finally admitted that this individual had such an impact on him, but he denied that he himself had made all these choices. He attributed the responsibility for the unhappy situation to the administrator. He himself, he declared, was not responsible. As we talked little by little, he came to realize that he was indeed responsible, but that because he did not handle this responsibility well, he was being irresponsible. Many divorced people fall into a similar pattern. They are still consumed with anger and bitterness and self-justification regarding an ex-spouse. In a negative sense, psychologically they are still married. They each need the weaknesses of the former partner to justify their accusation. Many older children go through life either secretly or openly hating their parents. They blame them for past abuses, neglect, or favoritism, and they center their adult life on that hatred, living out the reactive, justifying script that accompanies it. The individual who is friend or enemy-centered has no intrinsic security. Feelings of self-worth are volatile, a function of the emotional state or behavior of other people. Guidance comes from the person's perception of how others will respond, and wisdom is limited by the social lens or by an enemy-centered paranoia. The individual has no power. Other people are pulling the strings. Church-centeredness. I believe that almost everyone who is seriously involved in any church will recognize that church-going is not synonymous with personal spirituality. There are some people who get so busy in church worship and projects that they become insensitive to the pressing human needs that surround them, contradicting the very press that they profess to believe deeply. They are others who attend church less frequently or not at all, but whose attitudes and behavior reflect a more genuine centering in the principles of the basic Judeo-Christian ethic. Having participated throughout my life in organized church and community service group, I have found that attending church does not necessarily mean living the principle taught in those meetings. You can be active in a church, but inactive in its gospel. In the church-centered life, image or appearance can become a person's dominant consideration, leading to hypocrisy, that undermines personal security and intrinsic worth. Guidance comes from a social conscience, and the church-centered person tends to label others artificial in terms of active, inactive, liberal or orthodox, or conservative. Because the church is a formal organization made up of policies, program, practices, and people, it cannot by itself give a person any deep, permanent security or a sense of intrinsic worth. Living the principle taught by the church can do this, but the organization alone cannot. Nor can the church give a person a constant sense of guidance. Church-centered people often tend to live in a compartment, acting and thinking and feeling in certain ways on the Sabbath and in totally different ways on weekdays, such as lack of wholeness or unity or integrity is a further threat to security, creating the need for increased labeling and self-justifying. Seeing the church as an end rather than as means to an end undermines a person's wisdom and sense of balance. Although the church claims to teach people about the source of power, it does not claim to be that power itself. It claims to be one vehicle through which divine power can be channeled into man's nature. It claims to be one vehicle through which divine power can be channeled into man's nature. Self-centeredness. Perhaps the most common centered today is the self. The most obvious form is selfishness, which violates the values of most people. But if we look closely at many of the popular approaches to growth and self-fulfillment, we often find self-centering at their core. There is little security, guidance, wisdom, or power in that limited center of self. Like the Dead Sea in Israel, it accepts but never gives. It becomes stagnant. On the other hand, paying attention to the development of self in the greater perspective of improving one's ability to serve, to produce, to contribute in meaningful ways, gives context for dramatic increase in the 4 life support factor. There are some of the more common centers from which people approach life. It is often much easier to recognize the center in someone else's life than to see it in your own. You probably know someone who puts making money ahead of everything else. You probably know someone whose energy is devoted to justifying his or her position in an ongoing negative relationship. If you look, you can sometimes see beyond behavior into the center that creates it. Identifying your center. So, what is my center ba? But where do you stand? What is at the center of your own life? Sometimes that isn't easy to see. Perhaps the best way to identify your own center is to look closely at your life support factors. If you can identify which one or more of the description below, you can trace it back to the center from which it flows, a center which may be limiting your personal effectiveness. This one. Nabasa ba siya? Hindi siya masyadong nababasa. Parang baliktad. Ba't parang baliktad siya? Hi, Jendi. Thank you, thank you. Gandang gabi. So, how to identify your center? So, center. If you are spouse-centered, your security is, especially, hindi ako spouse-centered. Hindi pa naman ako, wala pa naman akong asawa. So, okay. Wala pa. So, hindi pa ako belong dito. Pero, baka gusto nyo malaman kung spouse-centered kayo. So, sa security, your feelings of security are based on the way your spouse treats you. You are highly vulnerable to the moods and feelings of your spouse. There is a deep disappointment resulting in withdrawal or conflict when your spouse disagrees with you or does not meet your expectations. Anything that may impinge on the relationship is perceived as a threat. Guidance. Your direction comes from your own needs and wants and from those of your spouse. Your decision-making criterion is limited to what you think is best for your marriage or your mate, or to the preference and opinions of your spouse. Parang ganun din. So, boyfriend? As boyfriend, parang malakas ang guidance. Wisdom. Your life perspective surrounds things which may positively or negatively influence your spouse or your relationship. And power. Your power to act is limited by weaknesses in your spouse and in yourself. Ay, hindi. Dito lang sa guidance. If you are family-centered, your security is founded on family acceptance and fulfilling family expectation. Check. Your sense of personal security is as volatile as the family. Check. Your feelings of self-worth are based on the family reputation. Check again. Family scripting is your source of correct attitudes and behaviors. Check. Your decision-making criterion is what is good for the family and what family members want. You interpret all of life in terms of your family, creating a partial narcissism. Check. Your actions are limited by family models and tradition. This is for the family-centered. Parang, yung centered ko is family. Check natin yung iba. If you are money-centered, your personal worth is determined by your net worth. Hindi naman. You are vulnerable to anything that threatens your economic security. Portion. Profit is your decision-making criterion. Parang, money-making is the lens through which life is seen and understood, creating an imbalanced judgment. Hindi naman. You are restricted to what you are accomplished with your money and your limited vision. Hindi. If you are work-centered, you tend to define Hello, love?
QR is quarantine ang record.
Ha?
Yung lang, ha?
Masuko mo di ka no? QR. Ang imuha is ano? Ambot, si QR, ang QR code ang imuhang ginapangutana?
Oo, sa mga R.
Ambot.
Q is quarantine. Ang R, record siguro na.
Check na to. Wala ni mo na ano? Kung unsa ang pasabot sa QR. Nga day, nga naman siya. Nganong asma ni mo? QR code. QR means. Basin reader. A QR code is a type of matrix barcode first, ano. Wala man siya. Is it, ano? What QR means? Quick response. Quick response.
Quick response daw?
May nakabutong. What QR means? QR is short for quick response. They can be read quickly by a cell phone. They are used to take a piece of information from a transitory media and put it in your cell phone. Made to access. Video sa Wikipedia daw tatanaw. QR code. Pero naiuban nga not to confuse with quadratic residue code. Amo lagi lab, a QR code abbreviated from quick response code. It's a type of matrix barcode. So, ang Q is quick, ang R is response.
Okay, thanks. Sama ka?
Nag-LS ko, nagbasa ko. Kaya after kuan na ako ang kuan.
Sige.
Bye-bye. If you are work-centered, you tend to define yourself by your occupation rule. Hindi, wala akong ganun. You are only comfortable when you are working. Comfortable when you're... Parang, comfortable lang pag You make your decision based on the needs and expectation of your work. Ay, hindi ko siya masyado. You tend to be limited to your work rule. You see your work as your life. Nakita ko ba? Hindi naman. Your actions are limited by work rule models, occupational opportunities, organizational constraint, your boss perception, and your possible inability at some point in your life to do that particular work. Quite lang, slight lang. If you are position-centered, your security is based on your reputation, your social status, or the tangible things you possess. You tend to compare what you have to what others have. Ay, hindi. You make your decision based on what will protect, increase, or better display your position. You see the world in terms of comparative, economic, and social relationship. Position-centered. Hindi. You function within the limits of what you can buy or the social prominence you can achieve. Parang, you function within the limits in what you can buy. My portion. If you are pleasured center, you feel secure only when you're on a pleasure high. No. Your security is short-lived anestheticism and dependent on your environment. No. You make your decision based on what will give you the most pleasure. Quite. You see the world in terms of what's in it for you. Hindi naman. Your power is almost negligible. Hindi. If you are friend-centered, your security is function of the social mirror. No? You are highly dependent on the opinions of others. My portion. Your decision-making criterion is what will they think. Hindi. You are easily embarrassed. Hindi rin. You see the world through a social lens. Parang, you are limited by your social comfort zone. Hindi. Lumalabas na ako sa ngayon. Your actions are as fickle as opinion. Hindi rin. If you are enemy-centered, your security is volatile based on the movements of your enemy. No? You are always wondering what he is up to. No? You seek self-justification and validation from the like-minded. No? You are counter-dependently guided by your enemy's action. No? You make your decision based on what will thwart your enemy. Hindi rin. Your judgment is narrow and distorted. No. You are defensive, overreactive, and open paranoid. Parang konti. Parang ako ganyan. Konti. If you are defensive, overreactive, and open paranoid. The little power you do have comes from anger. The little power you do have comes from envy, no, resentment, no, invidiance, no, negative energy that shrivels and destroys, leaving energy for little else. If you are church-centered, your security is based on the church activity and on the esteem in which you are held by those in authority or influence in the church. No. You find identity and security in religious level in comparison. No. You are guided by how others will evaluate your action in the context of church teaching and expectation. Yes. You see the world in terms of believers and non-believers, belongers and non-belongers. Oo. Perceived power comes from your church's position or rule. May pagka-church-centered din pala ako. At hindi ako masyadong nagsisimba na sa ngayon. If you are self-centered, your security is constantly changing and shifting. Your judgment criteria are, if it feels good, what I want, what I need, what's in it for me. May pagka-self-centered din pala ako. Kung ganun. You view the world by how decisions, events, and circumstances will affect you. Your ability to act is limited to your own resources without the benefits of interdependency. Parang nasa self-centered, church-centered, in money-centered. Pero mas mataas ang point sa family-centered. More often than not, a person's center is some combination of this and or other centers. Most people are very much a function of a variety of influences that play upon their lives. Depending on external or internal condition, one particular center may be activated until the underlying needs are satisfied. Then another center becomes the compelling force. As a person fluctuates from one center to another, the resulting relativism is like roller coasting through life. One moment, you're high. The next moment, you're low, making efforts to compensate for one weakness by borrowing strength from another weakness. There is no consistent sense of direction, no persistent wisdom, no steady power supply or sense of personal, intrinsic worth and identity. The ideal, of course, is to create one clear center from which you consistently derive a high degree of security guidance, wisdom, and power, empowering your proactivity and giving congruency and harmony to every part of your life. A principle center. By centering our lives on correct principles, we create a solid foundation for a development of the 4 life support factors. Our security comes from knowing that, unlike other centers based on people or things, we are subject to frequent and immediate change. Correct principles do not change. We can depend on them. Principles don't react to anything. They don't get mad and treat us differently. They won't divorce us or run away with our best friend. They aren't out to get us. They can't pave our way with shortcuts and quick fixes. They don't depend on the behavior of others, the environment, or the current fad for their validity. Principles don't die. They are open here one day and gone the next. They can't be destroyed by fire, earthquake, or thief. Principles are deep, fundamental truths, classic truths, generic common denominators. They are tightly interwoven threads running with exactness, consistency, beauty, and strength through the fabric of life. Even in the midst of people or circumstances that seem to ignore the principles, we can be secure in the knowledge that principles are bigger than people or circumstances, and that the thousands of years of history have been seen them triumph, time and time again. Even more important, we can be secured in the knowledge that we can validate them in our own lives by our own experience. Admittedly, we're not omniscient. Our knowledge and understanding of correct principle is limited by our own lack of flood of trendy philosophies and theories that are not in harmony with correct principles. These ideas would have their seasons of acceptance, but like many before them, they won't endure because they're built on false foundation. We are limited, but we can push back the borders of our limitation. An understanding of the principle of our own growth enables us to search out correct principles with the confidence that more we learn, the more clearly we can focus the lens through which we see the world. The principles don't change, our understanding of them does. The wisdom and guidance that accompany principle-centered living come from correct maps, from the way things really are, have been, and will be. Correct maps enables us to clearly see where we want to go and how to get there. We can make our decisions using the correct data that will make their implementations possible and meaningful. The personal power that comes from principle-centered living is the power of a self-aware, knowledgeable, proactive individual, unrestricted by the attitudes, behaviors, and action of others or by many of their circumstances and environmental influences that limit other people. The only real limitation of power is the natural consequences of the principles themselves. We are free to choose our actions based on our knowledge of correct principles, but we are not free to choose the consequences of those actions. Remember, if you pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other. Principles always have natural consequences attached to them. There are positive consequences when we live in harmony with the principles. There are negative consequences when we ignore them. But because these principles apply to everyone, whether or not they are aware, this limitation is universal. And the more we know of correct principles, the greater is our personal freedom to act wisely. By centering our lives on timeless, unchanging principles, we create a fundamental paradigm of effective living. It is the center that puts all other centers in perspective. So, dapat ganito. So, if you are principled center, your security is based on correct principles that do not change regardless of external condition or circumstances. Hindi pa ako principle-centered. You know that true principles can repeatedly be validated in your own life through your own experiences. Yes. As a measurement of self-improvement, correct principles function with exactness, consistency, beauty, and strength. Okay. Correct principles help you understand your own development, endowing you with the confidence to learn more, thereby increasing your knowledge and understanding. Okay. Your source of security provides you with an immovable, unchanging, unfailing core, enabling you to see change as exciting adventure and opportunity to make significant contribution. Tama. Guidance, you are guided by the compass which enables you to see where you want to go and how you will get there. Medyo, parang naanan ako kung saan na ang gusto ko sa buhay. You use accurate data which makes the decision both implementable and meaningful. Hindi pa masyado. You stand apart from life situation, emotions, and circumstances and look at the balanced whole. Your decision and action reflect both short and long-term consideration and implication. Yes. In every situation, you consciously, proactively determine the best alternative, basing decision on conscience educated by principles. May mga portion hindi. Pero may portion na oo. Your judgments encompasses a broad spectrum of long-term consequences and reflects a wise balance and quiet assurance. Correct? You see things differently and thus you think and act differently from the largely reactive world. My slide. You view the world through a fundamental paradigm for effective provident living. Masyado. You see the world in terms of what you can do for the world and its people. Slide. You adopt a proactive lifestyle seeking to serve and build others. Yes. Meron na dito na area. You interpret all life's experiences in terms of opportunities for learning and contribution. Oo. Tinitingnan ko talaga kung ano yung mga positive side. Your power is limited only by your understanding and observance of natural law and correct principles and by the natural consequences of the principles themselves. Okay? You become a self-aware, knowledgeable, proactive individual, largely unrestricted by the attitudes, behaviors, and actions or action of others. No? Masyado. Your ability to act reaches far beyond your own resources and encourages highly developed levels of interdependence. Hindi ko pa nare-reach ng interdependency. Your decision and actions are not driven by your current financial or circumstantial limitation. You experience an interdependent freedom. Wala pa ako dito. Ito pala yun. Nakita ba? So, sa principles, dito nakaano, paikot. Parang spin of wheel. Remember that your paradigm is the source from which your attitudes and behavior flow. A paradigm is like a pair of glasses. It affects the way you see everything in your life. If you look at things through the paradigm of correct principles, what you see in life is dramatically different from what you see through any other centered paradigm. I have included in the appendix section of this book a detailed chart which shows how each center we've discussed might possibly affect the way you see everything else. But for a quick understanding of the difference your center makes, let's look at just one example of a specific problem as seen through the different paradigms. As you read, try to put in each pair of glasses. Try to feel the response that flows from the different centers. Suppose tonight you have invited your wife to go to a concert. You have the tickets. She's excited about going. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. All of a sudden, your boss calls you into his office and says he needs your help through the evening to get ready for an important meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. If you're looking through spouse-centered or family-centered glasses, your main concern will be your wife. You may tell the boss you can't stay and you take her to the concert in an effort to please her. You may feel you have to stay to protect your job, but you'll do so grudgingly, anxious about her response, trying to justify your decision and protect yourself from his disappointment or anger. If you're looking through a money-centered lens, your main thought will be of the overtime you'll get or the influence working late will have on a potential raise. You may call your wife and simply tell her you have to stay, assuming she'll understand that economic demand comes first. May pagka-family-centered nga ako. If you're work-centered, you may be thinking of the opportunity. You can learn more about the job. You can make some points with the boss and further your career. You may give yourself a pat on the back for putting in hours well beyond what is required. Evidence of what a hard worker you are. Your wife should be proud of you. If you're position-centered, you might be thinking of the things the overtime income could buy, or you might consider what an asset to your reputation at the office it would be if you stayed. Everyone will hear tomorrow how noble, how sacrificing and dedicated you are. If you're pleasure-centered, you probably can the work and go to the concert, even if your wife will be happy for you to work late. You deserve a night out. If you're a friend-centered, your decision will be influenced by whether or not you have invited friends to attend the concert with you, or whether your friends at work were going to stay late too. If you're enemy-centered, you may stay late because you know it will give you a big edge over that person in the office who thinks he's the company's greatest asset. While he's off having fun, you'll be working and slaving, doing his work and yours, sacrificing your personal pleasure for the good of the company he can so blatantly ignore. If you're church-centered, you might be influenced by plans other church members have to attend the concert, by whether or not any church members work at your office, or by the nature of the concert. Handel's Messiah might rate higher priority than a rock concert. Your decision might also be affected by what you think a good church member would do and by whether you view the extra work as service or seeking after material wealth. If you're self-centered, you'll be focused on what will do you the most good. Would it be better for you to go out for the evening, or would it be better for you to make a few points with the boss? How the different opinions affect you. How the different options affects you will be your main concern. Kung nakaset na yung concert, may ticket na, handa na lahat. Para sa akin, pupunta ako sa concert. Pero, bago pumunta sa concert, titingnan ko muna kung merong pwedeng gumawa dun sa hinihingi ng boss. Para hindi rin naman maano yung company. Tama ba? Tama bang niisip ko? As we consider various ways of looking at a single event, it is any wonder that we have young lady or old lady perception problems in our interactions with each other. Can you see how fundamentally our centers affects us? Right down to our motivations, our daily decision, our actions, or in too many cases, our reaction, our interpretation or events. That's why understanding your own center is so important. And if that center does not empower you as a proactive person, It becomes fundamental to your effectiveness to make the necessary paradigm shift to create a center that will. As a principle-centered person, you try to stand apart from the emotion of the situation and from other factors that would act on you and evaluate the options. Looking at the balanced whole, the work needs, the family needs, other needs that may be involved in the possible implication of the various alternative decisions. You'll try to come up with the best solution, taking all factors into consideration. Whether you go to the concert or stay and work is really a small part of an effective decision. You might make the same choice with a number of other centers, but there are several important differences when you are coming from a principle-centered paradigm. First, you are not being acted upon by other people or circumstances. You are proactively choosing what you determine to be the best alternative. You make your decision consciously and knowledgeably. Second, you know your decision is most effective because it is based on principle with predictable long-term results. Third, what you choose to do contributes to your ultimate values in life. Staying at work to get the edge on someone at the office is an entirely different evening in your life from staying because you value your boss' effectiveness and you genuinely want to contribute to the company's welfare. The experiences you have as you carry out your decisions take on quality and meaning in the context of your life as a whole. Fourth, you can communicate to your wife and your boss within the strong networks you've created in your interdependent relationship. Because you are independent, you can be effectively interdependent. You might decide to delegate what is delegible and come in early the next morning to do the rest. And finally, you'll feel comfortable about your decision. Whatever you choose to do, you can focus on it and enjoy it. As a principle-centered person, you see things differently. And because you see things differently, you think differently. You act differently. Because you have a high degree of security, guidance, wisdom, and power that flows from a solid, unchanging core, you have the foundation of a highly proactive and highly effective life. So, 9 o'clock na, 9:30 na. Kanina kasi, pinag-usapan namin ng best friend ko yung pag-open ng box kasi today dapat bubuksan. Kahapon ko kasi nakuha yung package. Kaya lang, hindi pa siya ka-online. Hindi ko alam kung ano. Kaya, bago ako out sa live ko, ila-live ko yung pag-unboxing ko dun sa package para makita ko kung ano ba yung laman ng ano. Wait lang ha. Para bago ako matulog, na-unbox ko na siya. Tadaan! Kita ba? Selfiehan natin. Yan, di ba? Naka-selfie ako. Isa to sa sa online business na join ko. Tingnan natin yung product sa package. Yan! Ito na yung laman. Tadang! Chifax International. Then, ito pala yun. Hindi siya klaro. Parang baliktad. Apat nito. Apat. Isa, dalawa, yan. Isa, dalawa. Tatlo, nakaigit pang-apat. Tadang! Pang-apat to. Then, yan, yung spirulina. Then, the African, wait lang, ano ba? Yan. So, ito yung laman ng package. Matra-try ko na din siya. So, that's yun lang. Then, magandang gabi sa lahat. Salamat sa manonood ng channel ko. And, good night. Salamat, Jen, sa pagstay. Done na ako. Kasi 9 o'clock dapat tulog na ako. Good night. God bless everyone. Bye-bye. Sino ba to? And finish event.